a quiet archive record. Tonight, we enter a space untouched by urgency, where time slows and thought softens. Let the edges of the day blur and quietly disappear. For as long as people have looked up at the night sky, we have tried to understand what kind of place this universe is. We measure, we map, we name patterns, and we build stories that fit what we can observe. Most of the time, the universe is treated like a stage. Stars and galaxies are the actors. Physical laws are the rules. Space and time are the backdrop. But there is another way to look at it. Not as a stage, but as a system. Not as a machine built from dead parts, but as something that behaves, at least in some respects, like a living thing. This idea is not new. It shows up in old myths, in philosophy, and in modern science writing. Sometimes it becomes a spiritual claim. Sometimes it becomes a metaphor. And sometimes it becomes a serious question we can test, at least in pieces. Tonight, we are going to explore a specific version of that question. What if our entire universe is like a cell inside a much larger living being? Not a cell in a cartoon sense, but in the way a real biological cell is a complete world. A cell has borders. It has an inside chemistry. It has energy flows. It has information storage. It has repair. It has waste removal. It has growth and division. It responds to stress. It can be healthy or it can fail. If we take that picture seriously, the next step is to ask what the parallels could be. Where would the borders be? What would count as nutrients and waste? What would count as information? What would count as metabolism? What would count as reproduction? And most important, what kinds of observations would make the idea more plausible or less plausible? We are not going to claim we can prove it. We are not going to turn it into a sermon. We will stay with what we can define. We will use clear analogies, and we will also point out where the analogies break. Tonight, we ask if our universe could be a cell inside a larger living being. Start with a simple analogy that most people can picture. Imagine you are tiny, smaller than a grain of dust, living inside a single cell in your body. Your entire world is the cell. The cell is filled with a watery fluid. There are structures floating in it. Some structures make energy. Some build proteins. Some store information. The cell has a membrane around it. Things pass through that membrane, but not everything. Some molecules are allowed in. Some are pushed out. Some are blocked. From the inside, you might learn about the membrane by watching patterns. You might notice that certain things always arrive in a certain way. You might see waves of molecules when the outside environment changes. You might see that the chemistry inside has a stable balance, and when it is disturbed, it tends to return to that balance. And you might wonder, is there anything beyond the membrane? Is the cell a closed universe? Or is it a small part of a larger being that you cannot see? Now bring the scale back up. We live inside a universe. We see matter and energy. We see the laws of physics as far as we can test them. We see a horizon, a limit to what we can observe, because light has only had a certain amount of time to travel since the universe began expanding. That observable horizon is not necessarily a hard edge of reality. It is a limit of our view. But it is still a kind of boundary for us. Like a cell membrane, it marks a border between what is inside our known world and what is beyond our current observation. This is the first parallel. In a cell, the membrane is a real physical structure. In cosmology, the observable horizon is not a physical wall. It is more like a fog line, but both create an inside and an outside from the perspective of an observer. If we want to explore the idea that the universe is a cell, we need to define what we mean by a cell in a way that does not rely on biology only. We need a functional definition. A functional cell is a bounded system that maintains an internal environment, processes energy, stores and uses information, and stays organized over time despite constant change. That is basically the definition of life used in many areas of science. Life is not a single material. It is a pattern that persists by using energy to fight the natural drift toward disorder. So if the universe were a cell, the first question is whether it looks like a bounded system that maintains some kind of internal stability. Our universe is expanding. Galaxies move away from each other. The expansion rate has changed over time. Early on, expansion slowed down. Later, it started speeding up again, driven by something we call dark energy. At first, expansion sounds like the opposite of stability. It sounds like a system flying apart. But there is another way to see it. A cell is not static. It also changes. It grows. It takes in energy and matter. It builds and breaks structures. It can swell or shrink based on osmotic pressure. It can change its shape. Stability in biology does not mean nothing changes. Stability means the system stays within a range that keeps its core processes running. In cosmology, we can ask whether the universe has parameters that sit in a range that permits complex structures to form. This leads to the idea known as fine-tuning. Some physical constants appear to have values that allow stars to burn for billions of years, allow atoms to exist, allow chemistry, and allow stable planets. If those constants were slightly different, we might get a universe where everything collapses quickly, or expands too fast for galaxies to form, or has no stable atoms. People argue about what this means. Some think it points to design. Some think it is an illusion created by selection bias. We can only observe a universe that permits observers. But in our cell analogy, fine-tuning has a different flavor. In a living cell, the internal chemistry is held in a narrow range. Temperature, acidity, ion concentrations, energy levels, all of it must sit in a band that keeps proteins folded and reactions flowing. In other words, a cell is fine-tuned, but not by magic. It is fine-tuned by feedback loops, by membranes, by pumps, by enzymes, and by evolutionary history. So a question becomes, does the universe have feedback loops that keep key conditions in a life-permitting band? Here we hit a major difference. A cell is full of control systems that were built by evolution. The universe, as far as we know, does not have molecules and proteins acting as regulators, but it might have something else. Physical laws themselves can create feedback. For example, stars are a kind of self-regulating system. A star is a ball of plasma where gravity pulls inward and heat pressure pushes outward. If the star compresses too much, the core heats up, nuclear fusion speeds up, pressure rises, and the star expands. If the star expands too much, the core cools, fusion slows, pressure drops, and gravity pulls it inward again. That is a feedback loop. It is not alive, but it is a stable pattern that maintains itself. On larger scales, galaxies also show self-organization. They form from small density differences in the early universe. Gravity amplifies those differences. Matter clumps. Gas cools and forms stars. Star formation feeds back by heating gas and blowing it out. These are examples of self-organization, a key feature of living systems. But self-organization alone is not enough. A hurricane is self-organized. It is not alive. The next feature we can explore is metabolism. Metabolism is the set of processes by which a living system takes in energy and uses it to maintain structure and do work. A cell takes in nutrients and oxygen, breaks them down, captures energy in molecules like ATP, and uses that energy to build and repair. What would metabolism look like at the scale of a universe? The first problem is obvious. The universe does not seem to take in energy from outside. In standard physics, the universe is the total system. There is no outside. But our question already assumes a larger living being that contains our universe. In that picture, our universe is not the total system. It is a subsystem. So we can at least ask, if the universe were embedded inside something larger, what could count as an energy flow across a boundary? One possible place to look is the very beginning. The early universe had an enormous energy density. Space was hot and dense. Then it expanded and cooled. In some theories, that early high-energy state comes from a process like inflation, a rapid expansion driven by a high-energy field. Inflation is sometimes described as a kind of engine. It takes vacuum energy and converts it into the expansion of space, and later into particles and radiation. If you are looking for a metabolism analogy, inflation could be a form of nutrient injection. A pulse of energy sets up a new pocket universe, and then that pocket universe cools into a stable environment where complex structures can form. This leads directly into a set of ideas called cosmological natural selection. The rough idea is that universes might reproduce. A universe could give rise to new universes through processes associated with black holes. Each new universe might inherit slightly different physical constants. In that picture, universes that make lots of black holes make lots of baby universes. Over time, the population of universes would shift toward constants that favor black hole formation. This is speculative, but it is an attempt to bring a biological pattern into cosmology without invoking a designer. If universes reproduce, then a universe might be more like a cell in a larger organism. Cells reproduce by division. Universes might reproduce by budding off new regions of space-time. But we have to be cautious. In biology, reproduction is tied to information and heredity. Cells pass on DNA. Variations are small changes in genetic code. In cosmological natural selection, the heredity mechanism is not well defined. How would constants be copied? How would mutations occur? What is the substrate of the information? Still, it is a possible parallel. Black holes as reproduction organs. Let us slow down and build the analogy step by step. In a cell, you can point to a membrane. You can point to mitochondria. You can point to ribosomes. You can point to DNA. In a universe, we need to ask if there are equivalents. A membrane is a boundary that separates inside from outside, and it is selective. Do we have any selective boundary in cosmology? One candidate is the cosmic horizon. Not just the observable horizon, but horizons in general. Black holes have event horizons. The universe itself, in an accelerating expansion, can have a cosmological horizon, a limit beyond which events will never affect us. A horizon is a boundary in information. It marks what signals can cross. That is interesting, because in a cell, the membrane is also an information boundary. It controls what molecules, which are carriers of information, can enter and leave. We also have another boundary in physics, the laws and constants that define what is possible inside our universe. Those laws are like a rule set built into the system. In biology, the rule set is chemistry and physics, plus the constraints of evolved structures. In our analogy, physical law might function like the biochemical constraints inside a cell. Next, consider the idea of internal compartments. Cells have compartments. The nucleus keeps DNA separate. Mitochondria have their own membranes. The endoplasmic reticulum forms a network. Vesicles move cargo. In the universe, we see compartment-like structures too. Galaxies are islands of matter. Galaxy clusters are larger structures. Voids are regions with less matter. The cosmic web is a network of filaments and nodes, shaped by gravity and the distribution of dark matter. If you look at images of the cosmic web, you will notice it can look a little like the structure of neural networks or the vascular networks in organisms. This is a visual parallel, and visual parallels can be misleading, but it still suggests a question. Do networks that transport resources and information tend to form similar patterns across scales? In biology, networks form to move nutrients, oxygen, and signals with efficiency. In cosmology, the cosmic web forms because matter falls into gravitational wells and flows along gradients. The cause is different, but the math can sometimes be similar. Many network patterns are shaped by optimization or by simple growth rules. So one parallel might be this: both living beings and universes create networks that distribute matter and energy. Now, what about information? Living systems are defined by information. DNA stores a long code. Cells read that code and build proteins. They also store information in epigenetic marks, in the state of the cell, in chemical gradients. Does the universe store information? In physics, the state of the universe at any time contains information about all fields and particles. In principle, if you knew the exact state and the exact laws, you could predict the future. But there are limits. Quantum mechanics introduces uncertainty. Chaos amplifies small uncertainties, and there may be fundamental limits to how much information can be stored in a region of space. One famous idea is the holographic principle. It suggests that the maximum information inside a volume might be proportional to the area of its boundary, not the volume itself. This idea comes from black hole physics. A black hole has an entropy proportional to the area of its event horizon. Entropy is a measure related to the number of possible microstates, which is related to information. If a black hole is the most information-dense object you can have, then perhaps any region has a maximum information content tied to its surface. In our cell analogy, that is fascinating. It suggests that boundaries play a deep role in information storage. In a cell, the membrane is where many key processes happen. The membrane is not just a wall, it is active. It holds receptors, pumps, and channels. If the universe has a deep connection between information and boundaries, then maybe the boundary of our universe, whatever that means in a larger embedding, could be where information is controlled. Now consider repair. Cells repair themselves. They detect DNA damage. They fix broken strands. They replace damaged proteins. They recycle parts. Does the universe repair itself? At first, this sounds absurd, but we can ask a simpler version. Does the universe have mechanisms that smooth out disturbances? In many physical systems, disturbances dissipate. A hot region spreads heat. a pressure wave spreads out. A disturbed field relaxes. In cosmology, we see something similar. The universe, on large scales, is remarkably uniform. The cosmic microwave background is almost the same temperature in every direction, with tiny fluctuations. Inflation was proposed partly to explain why the universe is so uniform. Inflation would stretch space so fast that any initial curvature or unevenness would be flattened. That is not repair in a biological sense, but it is a smoothing mechanism. Another example is how galaxies and stars turn free gas into structured objects, but that is not smoothing, that is the opposite. It is structure formation. Living systems do both. They smooth disturbances that threaten the system, and they build structure where it helps function. So we might ask if the universe has both. It smooths some things, and it grows structure in others. Now, waste removal. Cells produce waste. They export it. They break it down. They manage toxic byproducts. In the universe, what would waste be? One candidate is entropy. In physics, entropy tends to increase. Over time, usable energy becomes less available. Heat spreads out. If the universe is like a cell, then entropy increase would be like metabolic waste buildup. In biology, waste buildup kills cells unless it is managed. In cosmology, the universe does not die from entropy increase quickly, but it does trend toward a state where no free energy is left to do work. That long-term outcome is sometimes called heat death. Stars burn out. Black holes evaporate. Everything becomes cold and thin. If that is the fate of our universe, then our cell would be aging. In organisms, aging is tied to damage accumulation, loss of repair efficiency, and increasing disorder. So the analogy would be, cosmic heat death is a kind of aging process. But again, analogies can go too far. In biology, aging happens because organisms are not perfectly optimized for indefinite survival. Evolution favors reproduction more than perfect maintenance. In a universe, there is no evolution in the same way, unless you adopt a cosmological reproduction model. If universes reproduce, then perhaps universes that last long enough to produce many offspring would be favored. That would make the aging analogy more direct. Now, a key piece of the cell analogy is that cells are part of a larger being. They are not the whole organism. So if our universe is a cell, what is the organism? We cannot see it directly, by definition, but we can ask what signs might point to an embedding. In biology, when you are inside a cell, you might detect external influences, temperature changes, chemical signals arriving at the membrane, mechanical stress. In our universe, external influence would appear as anomalies that do not fit the internal laws, or as boundary effects. We can imagine a few categories. First, unexpected patterns in the cosmic microwave background. If our universe collided with another universe in the early phase, it might leave a circular pattern, like a bruise. People have looked for such patterns. So far, nothing conclusive. Second, strange behavior in dark energy. If dark energy changes over time in an unexpected way, it could suggest interaction with something beyond our standard model. Third, violations of conservation laws. Inside a closed system, energy and momentum are conserved. If energy appeared or disappeared without explanation, it could suggest exchange with an outside. In modern physics, energy conservation in an expanding universe is subtle, but local conservation still holds in known conditions. If we found a clear, repeatable violation of local conservation, that would be shocking and would force us to consider new physics. Fourth, unexpected limits on information or computation. There is a field called digital physics that explores whether the universe behaves like a computation. If the universe has discrete limits, like a maximum processing rate or a minimum time step, that could hint at an underlying substrate. But that could also just be a feature of quantum gravity, not an organism. Now let us return to the main claim, universe as a cell. To make progress, we can break the claim into a set of testable subclaims. 1. The universe is a bounded subsystem within a larger system. 2. There are flows of energy, matter, or information across the boundary. 3. The universe maintains internal conditions that permit complexity through feedback mechanisms. 4. The universe participates in a reproduction or generation process that resembles biological reproduction. 5. The universe is part of a larger entity with an overall function in which our universe plays a role. Each of these can be explored and criticized. Claim 1, bounded subsystem. In standard cosmology, the universe may be infinite. It may also be finite but unbounded, like the surface of a sphere in higher dimensions. In either case, there is not an edge you can reach. A cell has an edge you can reach. That seems like a mismatch. But a cell boundary is not defined by reachability. It is defined by separation and control. If the universe is embedded in something larger, it could be bounded in a higher dimensional sense, even if it has no internal edge. A simple analogy is a two-dimensional world living on the surface of a balloon. The creatures can travel forever without hitting an edge, but the surface is still a bounded object in 3 dimensions. So our universe could be like the surface, and the larger organism could exist in higher dimensions. This is not just science fiction. Some physical theories, like certain versions of string theory, involve extra dimensions. There are also models where our universe is a brain, a lower dimensional surface in a higher dimensional space. If our universe is a brain, then it is literally like a membrane. That is striking, because cells also rely on membranes. In brain models, ordinary matter and light may be confined to the brain, while gravity can leak into the extra dimensions. This could explain why gravity is so weak compared to other forces. If gravity leaks, that is an information flow. It is an interaction across a boundary. This is one of the most concrete scientific places where the cell analogy touches real theory. But does a brain universe imply a living organism? No, it implies a higher dimensional space. The organism part is still a leap. Still, the membrane idea is present. Claim 2 flows across a boundary. If there is an outside, there could be exchange. In brain models, gravity exchange is possible. In other models, particles might be able to leave or enter under rare conditions. If that happened, we might observe it as missing energy, or as weird particle events. There are experiments looking for signs of extra dimensions, including missing energy events in particle colliders. So far, no solid evidence. Claim 3, internal stability through feedback. We already mentioned stars as self-regulating systems, but a living cell maintains chemistry far from equilibrium. It uses energy to do this. The universe is far from equilibrium in the sense that it has gradients, hot and cold, dense and sparse, high energy and low energy. Gradients are what allow work. A universe that quickly reached thermal equilibrium would be boring. No stars, no chemistry, just uniform radiation. Our universe had an early time of near uniformity, but then structure formed. Structure formation is powered by gravity. Gravity makes clumps. So the universe is in a constant tension between smoothing processes and clumping processes. In a sense, that is like the tension inside living systems between diffusion and organization. Now, living systems also have a key feature. They process information. They sense their environment and they respond. Does the universe sense and respond? In a naive way, no. The universe does not have a brain. But there are ideas in physics that bring information to the center. One is that physical laws might be constraints on information processing. Another is that quantum mechanics, with its measurement problem, suggests that observation plays a role in defining outcomes. Some people take that and run too far, claiming consciousness creates reality. We are not going to do that. Instead, we can stick to something simpler. The universe evolves according to rules that can be described as information transformations. If the universe is a computation, then the state at one moment is transformed into the state at the next. In that sense, the universe is always processing information. Living cells also process information, but they do it in a goal-directed way, shaped by survival. If there were a larger organism, perhaps the evolution of our universe is part of its information processing. That is a big claim, but it suggests an analogy. A cell is not aware, but it participates in the body. It receives signals. It expresses genes. It plays a role. Our universe could be a cell in a larger mind-like organism, and the expansion and evolution of our cosmos could be the expression of its inner program. Again, this is speculation. But to be fair, we can explore what would be required for it to be more than poetry. In biology, cells communicate. They send chemical signals. They use hormones, neurotransmitters, immune signaling. If universes were cells, then universes might communicate. How would that look? It could look like interactions through a higher dimensional medium. It could look like collisions or entanglement between brains. If that happened, we might see unusual correlations in the cosmic microwave background, or we might see a sudden shift in physical constants, which would be catastrophic. But if the larger organism uses stable cells, it would likely keep them stable. That suggests any crosstalk would be subtle. Now, there is another deep parallel: scale. Biology is built from nested layers. Molecules form organelles. Organelles form cells. Cells form tissues. Tissues form organs. Organs form organisms. Organisms form ecosystems. At each level, new rules emerge. A single molecule is not alive. A cell is alive. A tissue is not alive in the same way, but it has properties the cell does not. An organism has behavior. An ecosystem has dynamics. This nesting is one of the most powerful patterns in nature, so it is tempting to ask whether the universe might be one more layer. If cells are nested inside organisms, could universes be nested inside something bigger? There is no law that says the nesting stops at our scale, but we also have no evidence that it continues. So the honest stance is, it is possible in principle, but unknown. Now let us get more concrete. Let us list specific parallels we could draw, and for each one, assess whether it is a meaningful parallel or just a metaphor. Parallel 1, boundary and compartment. Cell, membrane, universe, horizon, brain, or causal boundary. Meaningful, somewhat. Boundaries are central to both. Physics already suggests horizons have deep meaning for information. Parallel 2, energy source and metabolism. Cell, nutrients, chemical energy, ATP. Universe, early high energy state, stars converting mass to radiation, black holes converting mass to heat. vacuum energy driving expansion. Meaningful, partial. The universe has energy flows and conversions, but it is not clear there is an external nutrient supply. Parallel 3. Information storage. Cell. DNA, RNA, proteins, signaling pathways. Universe, quantum state, physical laws, holographic limits, initial conditions. Meaningful, partial. The universe clearly has information content, but there is no known code like DNA that is copied for a purpose. Parallel 4. Growth and development. Cell. Growth cycle, differentiation. Universe. Expansion, cooling. Phase transitions. Structure formation. Meaningful. Quite strong as an analogy. The universe had phases like the formation of atoms, the formation of stars, the formation of heavy elements, the formation of planets. It looks like development, but development in biology is guided by genetic programs. The universe follows physical law. Parallel 5. Reproduction. Cell. Division. Universe. Black hole reproduction hypothesis. Eternal inflation creating bubble universes. Meaningful. Speculative, but interesting. Some physical models allow something that looks like budding. Parallel 6. Evolution. Cell. Mutation and selection. Universe. Cosmological natural selection. Meaningful. Very speculative, because the heredity mechanism is unclear. Parallel 7. Purpose. Cell. Serves the organism. Universe. Serves a larger being. Meaningful. Pure speculation, unless there is evidence of higher level function. This is where most versions of this idea become philosophy. Now, to go deep into the parallels, we should talk about what a cell actually is at a basic level. A cell is a chemical factory inside a boundary. It is not made of special matter. It is made of atoms like everything else. What makes it different is organization. In a cell, there are reaction pathways that form loops. A produces B, B produces C, C produces A. These loops allow the system to maintain itself. There is a concept called autopoiesis, which describes systems that produce and maintain their own components. A cell is an autopoietic system. It makes the membrane that makes the cell possible. It makes the proteins that make the reactions possible. It is a self-making system. Could a universe be self-making? In physics, there are ideas where the universe could arise from a fluctuation, or from a tunneling event, or from a deeper underlying law. Some models suggest that the total energy of the universe might be zero, with positive energy in matter balanced by negative energy in gravity. If that were true, a universe could appear without violating conservation laws in a certain sense. That does not make it alive, but it does make it self-contained. Now consider another aspect of cells. They use gradients across the membrane. Cells use proton gradients to make ATP. They use ion gradients to send signals. They use concentration differences to drive transport. So a cell is not just chemistry. It is chemistry with spatial separation. The membrane creates inside and outside, and that allows gradients. Does the universe have gradients at a boundary? We do not know. But we do know that horizons create temperature. A black hole horizon has a temperature, Hawking radiation. A cosmological horizon in an accelerating universe can also be associated with a temperature, so horizons have thermodynamic properties. Thermodynamics is deeply connected to information, and information is deeply connected to physics. This is a core theme. If we want to strengthen the analogy between a universe and a cell, we should focus on information and thermodynamics, because life is a thermodynamic phenomenon. Life is a way to keep local order by exporting entropy to the environment. A cell keeps itself organized by dumping waste heat and waste molecules. If our universe is a cell, it might keep some internal structure by exporting entropy to the larger organism. How would that export happen? One idea is that black holes could be entropy export channels. Black holes swallow matter and information in some sense. They also emit Hawking radiation over extremely long times. But in some quantum gravity ideas, black holes might connect to other regions of space-time. Wormholes are a speculative example. If black holes connect to other universes, then they could be transport channels. That would be a strong cell-like feature, pores in a membrane. But there is no evidence that black holes are wormholes. Still, we can explore the logic. In a cell, transport is controlled. It is selective. It is regulated. Black holes do not look regulated. They are defined by mass, charge, and spin. They swallow anything that crosses the horizon. That is not selective. But maybe the selectivity is at the level of which regions can form black holes in the first place. Only certain conditions form them. Density must cross a threshold. Stars must be above a mass limit. So the universe has rules that determine where these channels form. That is still a weak analogy, but it is something. Now let us talk about the cell nucleus, because it is a strong symbol of control. The nucleus holds the genome. The genome is the compressed instruction set. If the universe had a genome, where would it be? We could think of the laws of physics as the genome, but laws are not stored in a place. They are universal. Unless the laws emerge from boundary conditions or from a deeper layer, there is a possibility that what we call laws are not fundamental. They could be emergent. For example, temperature is not fundamental. It emerges from the behavior of many particles. Similarly, space-time might be emergent from something deeper, like quantum entanglement. If space-time is emergent, then the universe is like a pattern in a deeper substrate. That deeper substrate could be the larger organism. In that picture, our universe is like a bubble in a larger medium. A cell is also a bubble in a medium. It is a compartment in the body. So again, the analogy returns. Now, we should address a major objection. Cells are clearly alive because they have selection history. They are part of evolution. The universe has no clear selection history we can observe, so calling it alive might be category error. Maybe it is better to say the universe has life-like properties. It self-organizes, it processes energy, it has long-term structure, it has information limits. But that does not mean it has goals. Life is often defined by goal-like behavior, like maintaining itself. But goal-like behavior can emerge from simple rules. A thermostat has goal-like behavior. It maintains temperature. It is not alive. So again, we must be careful. Now, let us consider the simplest version of the idea. The universe is like a cell, but it is not literally part of a living organism. The cell analogy is a way to understand it as a complex system. This is the safer, more scientific framing. But Raphael asked a more specific one. What if it is inside a larger living being? So we should explore what the larger being might be like. A larger being that contains universes as cells would operate at a scale beyond our comprehension. Its body would not be made of atoms as we know them. Or if it is, it would be in a space with different dimensions. Its time scale could be different. For a cell, our entire lifetime is short. Cells divide in hours or days. We live decades. For a universe, billions of years pass. If a larger organism exists, maybe its life cycle is trillions of years. Or maybe time is not the same for it. If the organism uses universes as cells, it would likely have many universes. That would be like a tissue. In tissues, cells are not all the same. There are different cell types, so there might be different kinds of universes. Some might be like muscle cells, specialized for force. Some might be like neurons, specialized for signaling. Some might be like immune cells, specialized for defense. This becomes imaginative quickly, but we can still ask what would correspond to specialization. In physics, specialization could mean different physical constants, different particle types, different dimensions. Perhaps some universes are better at making black holes. Perhaps some are better at producing long-lived stars. Perhaps some are better at producing complex chemistry. If the organism is alive, it might prefer certain outputs. What outputs could a universe produce that a larger being could use? One possible answer is information. Complex structures create complexity. Complexity generates information. If the larger organism is a kind of mind, it might use universes to generate patterns. In that picture, life and consciousness inside a universe could be part of the larger being's internal processing. This is a classic idea. It shows up in panpsychism, in certain philosophical systems, in science fiction. But again, evidence is absent. So the goal here is not to convince, it is to explore the parallel. Now let us anchor this in real science again. In biology, a cell uses gene expression to respond. In physics, what is the equivalent of gene expression? Perhaps phase transitions. The early universe went through phase transitions as it cooled. Forces separated. Particles gained mass. Atoms formed. These transitions are like developmental stages. If the initial conditions are like genetic code, then the developmental path of the universe is like embryology. In developmental biology, small differences in early conditions can lead to different outcomes. In cosmology, small differences in density fluctuations lead to different galaxy distributions. So the universe has a sensitivity to early conditions. That is like development. If our universe is a cell, its early inflation and initial conditions are like the cell's initial state right after division. Then it grows, forms structure, and changes. Now consider another major property of life, homeostasis. Homeostasis is the tendency to keep internal conditions stable. Blood sugar, temperature, pH, and more. Does the universe have homeostasis? Some things are stable. The speed of light seems constant. The fine structure constant seems constant within measurement. But those are constants, not regulated variables. However, there are models where constants could vary slowly over time. If we observed variation in constants, that would open new questions. Could there be feedback that stabilizes them? This is not mainstream, but it is a possible place where a homeostasis analogy could become more than poetry. Now, another parallel. Immune system. Cells have immune defenses. Organisms fight infection. If the larger organism has universes as cells, what would infection be? Perhaps a universe could be invaded by a phenomenon from the outside, like a bubble collision. Or perhaps instability in vacuum states could spread. There is a concept called false vacuum decay. In some theories, our universe might be in a metastable vacuum state. A more stable vacuum could exist. If a bubble of that stable vacuum formed somewhere, it would expand at near light speed, changing physics as it goes. It would destroy structures. From inside, it would look like sudden death. If such vacuum decay can happen, then universes might have vulnerabilities. A larger organism would need ways to manage that risk. Again, this is speculation, but it shows that cosmic processes can be mapped to biological threats. Now we should also mention that biological cells themselves are universes of sorts. Inside a cell, there are molecular machines. Proteins fold, bind, and change shape. DNA is copied. Signals propagate. This happens in a fluid environment. If you zoom in enough, the cell is a busy city. If our universe is a cell, then we are like molecular machines inside it. That would make our scale very small in the larger organism. In your body, most cells do not know the organism exists. They respond to local signals. They do their job. If our universe is inside a larger being, we might never know directly, but we could still look for indirect signs. So what indirect signs could exist? One is evidence of higher dimensional embedding. Another is evidence of non-random initial conditions that look optimized for some function. But optimization can be a trap. We will see patterns even when none exist, so we would need a clear definition of function and a way to test it. For example, if the function were to maximize black hole production, then the cosmological natural selection theory provides a testable direction. Do the constants appear tuned to maximize black holes? Some people have tried to study this. It is not settled. Another possible function could be to maximize complexity or computation. There is a concept called the maximum entropy production principle, which in some systems describes a tendency to evolve towards states that produce entropy rapidly under constraints. Some argue this can lead to complex structures. If universes behave in a way that tends to maximize entropy production, then complexity and life could be natural outcomes. But again, this is physics, not biology. Now let us build a simple, easy to grasp example of the scale analogy. If you are in a cell, you might measure the speed of diffusion. You might observe that molecules bump around randomly. From that, you could infer that the world is noisy and uncertain. In our universe, quantum mechanics shows random outcomes in measurement. Maybe quantum noise is like molecular thermal noise. In a cell, thermal noise is not a bug. Biology uses it. It allows random motion. It allows exploration of states. In our universe, quantum noise might not be a bug either. It might be a core feature that allows the universe to explore possibilities. In some interpretations, all possibilities exist. In others, only one is realized. But in either case, quantum uncertainty is a kind of built-in randomness. Life uses randomness for evolution. So again, there is a parallel. But parallel does not mean identity. Now, another analogy. Cell division. When a cell divides, it copies DNA, duplicates organelles, and splits into two. If a universe divides, what would that mean? In eternal inflation, space continues inflating in some regions. Bubble universes form when inflation ends locally. Each bubble is like a new universe. So bubble formation is like budding. If black holes create new universes, then black hole formation is like forming a seed that develops into a new universe. In both pictures, reproduction is not division of an existing universe into two equal halves. It is more like branching. That is more like how some organisms reproduce, like plants sending runners. So the analogy can shift. Now, we should explore how far we can take the idea without breaking logic. A cell is a bounded region of chemistry. Our universe is a bounded region of space-time. In physics, space-time is the stage. But in some theories, space-time is emergent. It is like a fabric created by deeper relations. In that view, a universe is a pattern of relations. A cell is also a pattern of relations among molecules. So both are patterns. Life might be best understood as a certain type of pattern, a pattern that persists by copying itself and by controlling flows. If universes can reproduce, then a universe can also be such a pattern. This is where the analogy becomes strongest: reproduction and heredity. Without reproduction, the universe as a cell is mostly metaphor. With reproduction, it becomes a candidate for a kind of life. So let us go deeper into cosmological reproduction ideas. First, eternal inflation. Inflation was introduced to solve problems in the standard Big Bang model, like the horizon problem and the flatness problem. In many inflation models, once inflation starts, it does not end everywhere at once. It ends in patches, creating bubble universes, while other regions keep inflating. That means inflation produces a multiverse, a larger space with many pocket universes. In that picture, our universe is one bubble. The inflating space is like the larger medium. Now, is the inflating space alive? Not necessarily, but it is a larger environment that generates universes. That is similar to an organism generating cells. Second, black hole cosmology. Lee Smolin proposed cosmological natural selection. In his version, each black hole could create a new universe on the other side of a bounce, instead of a singularity. The new universe could have slightly different constants. Universes that make many black holes would have many offspring. This is like selection. Now, in biology, selection happens because individuals vary in traits that affect reproduction. In this model, constants affect black hole production. So the constants are like traits. If the model is correct, then our universe's constants might be near a local maximum of black hole production. That is a testable claim. However, the model faces challenges. We do not know that black holes create new universes. We do not know how constants would vary. We do not know how heredity works. Still, it is one of the most biology-like ideas in cosmology. If we combine this with the larger living being concept, we can imagine the larger organism as the multiverse itself. The multiverse could be a living ecosystem. Our universe would be one cell in its body. Now again, this is a metaphor, unless we can define life at that scale. In biology, life is a system that maintains itself and reproduces. If a multiverse generates universes, and those universes generate more, you could argue there is reproduction. If there is also a kind of selection, you could argue there is evolution. Then the multiverse could be alive in a broad sense. But this still does not mean it has a mind or purpose. Some living systems do not have minds. A colony of bacteria is alive. It has no central mind. So a living multiverse would not necessarily be conscious. Now bring this back to the original question. What if our universe is a cell in a larger living being? In the strongest version, the larger being is a real organism with an internal biology in which universes are cells. In a weaker version, the larger being is a living multiverse or a self-reproducing set of universes. In an even weaker version, it is just a metaphor to help us understand complex systems. We can explore all three. Let us talk about what a real organism would require. An organism has integrated function. It has tissues that work together. Cells specialize. They coordinate. The organism has an overall life cycle. It grows, reproduces, and dies. If universes are cells, then the organism might have a life cycle. The birth of a universe would be like cell formation. The death of a universe, heat death or vacuum decay, would be like cell death. In biology, cell death can be random or it can be programmed, like apoptosis. Programmed cell death is used to shape development and to remove damaged cells. If universes die, could that be part of a larger cycle? This is an idea in some cyclic cosmologies. A universe might expand, cool, and then contract or bounce. But current observations favor continued expansion. Still, the concept of cycles exists. If a larger organism exists, maybe universes are created and destroyed as part of its maintenance. Now consider that in biology, cells share resources through blood vessels, so the organism must have transport. If universes are cells, what is the transport between them? Perhaps the higher dimensional space allows exchange. Perhaps wormholes connect them. If wormholes exist and can connect distant regions, they could be like tubes. Wormholes are consistent with general relativity in principle, but they likely require exotic matter to stay open. We do not know if they exist. Still, if they did, they could allow resource flows. So the cell analogy suggests a prediction. If universes are cells, there might be connections like wormholes. But wormholes might also exist for other reasons. Now let us talk about scale again, because scale shapes what is possible. Inside a cell, you are in a fluid environment. Motion is dominated by viscosity. Random collisions dominate. At our scale, motion is dominated by inertia. At cosmic scales, motion is dominated by gravity and expansion. So each scale has different dominant forces. If universes are cells in a larger organism, then the organism's physics could be different. Our physics might be like chemistry inside a cell, not the physics of the whole organism. That is an important point. It could explain why our laws look fixed and simple. They are the local rules inside a compartment. The organism outside could have different rules. Now let us develop the analogy further by comparing specific processes. In a cell, mitochondria produce energy by turning food into ATP. In a universe, stars produce energy by turning hydrogen into heavier elements and radiation. Stars are like energy factories. They also produce heavy elements, which are like raw materials for complex chemistry. In a way, stars are the mitochondria of the universe. This analogy is used often. It is not perfect, but it is easy to understand. In a cell, the ribosomes build proteins from amino acids using instructions from RNA. In a universe, what builds complex structures? Chemistry builds molecules. Gravity builds planets. Evolution builds organisms. So the builders are layered. A universe has built-in builders. That is interesting. Now, if the universe is a cell, then life inside it might be like proteins inside a cell. Proteins perform functions. They catalyze reactions. They build structures. Similarly, life might be part of the universe's internal function. Again, speculative. But it is one of the most compelling parts of the idea. Our own existence could be part of the mechanism. This brings us to the concept of the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle says that any universe we observe must be compatible with our existence. This can be used in weak form as a selection effect, or in strong form as a claim that the universe is in some way set up for observers. In the cell analogy, the anthropic principle would be like this. Inside a living organism, cells exist in a way that supports the organism, and the organism supports the cells. The environment is not random, it is shaped. So if our universe is a cell, then the fact that it supports life is not surprising. It is part of its role, but we have no evidence of that role. Now, let us consider a different angle: fractals and self-similarity. Fractals are patterns that repeat across scales, coastlines, branching trees, river networks, blood vessels. Some people claim the universe is fractal. The large-scale distribution of galaxies has some fractal-like properties at certain scales, but on very large scales, it becomes uniform. Still, self-similarity shows up in many systems. If the universe were like a cell, we might expect to see patterns that resemble biological networks. We do see the cosmic web. But again, the cosmic web is driven by gravity. The reason it looks like a network is because gravity makes filament structures. So the similarity might just be that networks are common solutions to growth under constraints. Now think about the cell membrane again. The membrane is not just a boundary, it is where the cell interacts with the outside. If our universe has a boundary in a higher dimensional space, that boundary might also be where it interacts. So perhaps the most important physics is at the boundary. This aligns with holographic ideas. In the ADS-CFT correspondence, a theory of gravity in a volume can be equivalent to a quantum field theory on the boundary. This is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that holography is real in some cases. If our universe were holographic, then in a sense, the true description of our world could be on a boundary. That is like a cell where key control happens on the membrane. Again, this is not proof of life, but it is a deep parallel. Now, we should provide some easy examples to keep this grounded. Example 1, the aquarium analogy. Imagine an aquarium with fish. The fish live in water. They might think water is all there is, but the aquarium is inside a room. The room contains air. The room contains people. The room contains a building. From inside the aquarium, the fish might detect changes. The water temperature changes when the heater turns on. Food arrives from above. Shadows pass. Those are hints of an outside. Our universe could be like the aquarium. We might detect outside influences as changes in constants, unusual energy injections, or boundary effects. We have not detected clear signs, but it is a useful way to picture what we would look for. Example 2, the computer simulation analogy. Some people suggest we might be in a simulation. That is not the same as being in a cell, but it shares the idea of an outside system generating our inside world. If we were in a simulation, we might see glitches or limits. If we were in a cell in a larger organism, we might also see limits, like information bounds. The difference is that in a cell, the substrate is physical, not digital, but the observational hints might look similar. Discrete limits, boundary effects, strange correlations. Example 3, the city in a body analogy. Imagine a city built inside a giant organism. The city has its own economy, its own weather, its own traffic. People inside the city might not know they are inside a body, but sometimes the organism moves. Sometimes it gets sick. Sometimes it eats. Sometimes it sleeps. Those events create global changes that the city can detect but not explain. In our universe, we might detect global shifts, like a change in dark energy over time, but not know the cause. Again, this is just a mental model. Now let us return to the biggest question. Is there any reason to think the universe is literally alive? There are a few arguments people use. One is that life emerges from physics, so physics might already contain the seeds of life at all levels. Another is that the universe seems tuned for life. Another is that information seems fundamental, and life is information. Another is that reproduction could exist at cosmic scale. But none of these are proofs. So the honest approach is to treat the claim as a hypothesis generator. It suggests new questions. It suggests what to look for. It suggests how to interpret certain theories. Now let us do a deeper comparison between cells and universes using a more systematic approach. We will consider 7 properties. 1. Boundary. 2. Internal environment. 3. Energy processing. 4. Information storage and control. 5. Self-maintenance. 6. Reproduction. 7. Interaction with other similar units. Property 1. Boundary. Cells have membranes. Universes might have horizons or brains. If our universe is embedded, then the boundary might be in higher dimensions. The strongest physical hint of boundary significance is black hole thermodynamics and holography. Property 2. Internal environment. Cells have cytoplasm, organelles, and controlled chemistry. Our universe has fields, particles, and physical constants. Is it controlled? We do not see active regulation, but we see stable constants. Property 3. Energy processing. Cells use metabolism. Our universe has stars and nuclear fusion, which convert mass to energy. It also has gravitational energy, which drives structure. Energy flows from dense to sparse, from hot to cold. Property 4. Information control. Cells have gene networks. Our universe has initial conditions, laws, and quantum information. It is not clear there is a control layer, but there may be constraints that act like a code. Property 5. Self-maintenance. Cells repair. The universe has smoothing mechanisms like inflation and stable structures like stars. But there is no sign the universe acts to preserve itself as a whole. Property 6. Reproduction. Cells divide. Universes might bud in inflation or through black holes. No direct evidence. Property 7. Interaction. Cells communicate. Universes might collide or connect through wormholes. No direct evidence. So the analogy is partially supported by some features and weak in others. Now let us consider a more subtle parallel. The role of observers. In biology, cells only have meaning in a living context. A dead cell is just chemistry. In cosmology, some people suggest observers play a special role, but this is controversial. In quantum mechanics, measurement is special, but measurement is just interaction. Still, if information is fundamental, then observers as information processing systems could be significant. If the universe is a cell in a larger being, then observers might be like specialized structures inside the cell, like signaling complexes. This is again imaginative, but it keeps the idea in the realm of information rather than magic. Now we should discuss a major pitfall: anthropomorphism. Humans love to project life onto things. We see faces in clouds. We see intention in random events. So the idea of a living universe can be a psychological temptation. To avoid that, we need clear criteria. A key criterion is reproduction with heredity. Another is adaptive response. If the universe could change its behavior in response to conditions in a way that preserves it, that would be stronger. We do not see that yet. Now, consider another scientific framework: complex systems and emergence. A complex system can show properties that look alive. It can self-organize. It can have attractors, stable states. It can have feedback loops. It can have phase transitions. The universe is the largest complex system we know, so it is not surprising that it shares patterns with living systems. This might explain most of the parallels without needing a larger organism, but it doesn't rule out the larger organism. It just means the parallels are not enough. Now let us explore the question of scale one more time, but with numbers. A human cell is about 10 micrometers across. A human is about 1 to 2 meters. So the organism is about 100,000 times bigger than the cell. If our universe is a cell, and if the same ratio applied, the larger being would be about 100,000 times larger than our universe. Our observable universe is about 93 billion light years across. Multiply that by 100,000 and you get 9.3 million billion light years. That number is so large it becomes meaningless. But it shows that if the analogy were literal, the larger being could be unimaginably larger. Now another ratio is time. Cells divide in hours or days. Humans live decades. That is a ratio of maybe 10,000 or more. Our universe is 13.8 billion years old. Multiply by 10,000 and you get 138 trillion years. That is still finite, but extremely long. So the larger being's timescale could be far beyond anything we can imagine. This supports the idea that we might never detect it directly. Now, let us consider a different kind of evidence: mathematical universality. The same equations appear in different domains. Diffusion equations appear in heat flow and in population dynamics. Network theory applies to neurons and to the internet. Power laws show up in earthquakes and in city sizes. So seeing similar patterns across scales is normal. It does not prove a living organism, but it does suggest that the universe might naturally produce life-like patterns. Now let us talk about the idea of the universe as an organism itself. Some philosophers have suggested this. The universe as a whole could be alive. In that case, the cell analogy flips. We are cells in the universe, not the other way around. In some ways, this is a more direct analogy, because we can see life inside the universe. But the original idea is nested one level up. Universe as cell in a larger being. We can also mention a concept called Gaia, the idea that Earth behaves like a living system. Gaia is not a claim that Earth is conscious. It is a claim that feedback loops in the biosphere and atmosphere regulate conditions. This is partly true. Life has changed Earth's atmosphere. Life influences climate. So Earth has some homeostasis. If Earth can show system-level regulation because of life inside it, then a universe could show system-level regulation because of life inside it. This is an important twist. Maybe the universe is a cell because of what is inside it. If life and intelligence become common, they might reshape the universe. They could build structures, harvest energy, move matter. Over long times, advanced civilizations could alter cosmic conditions. That would be like cells inside a bodybuilding tissues. So in a far future, the universe could become more organism-like because of its contents. This is called the participatory universe idea in some interpretations. Again, speculative, but it gives a path from physics to life-like behavior without requiring a pre-existing organism. Now let us provide some easy analogies for key cosmology terms, because we are going deep. Inflation. Think of inflation like stretching a rubber sheet fast. Tiny wrinkles get stretched flat. That makes the surface smoother. Then the sheet stops stretching so fast, and normal expansion continues. That is inflation in a picture. Dark energy. Think of dark energy like a built-in push in space itself. It is not a force like a rocket pushing galaxies. It is a property of space that makes expansion speed up. Black hole. Think of a black hole like a region where gravity is so strong that the escape speed is higher than the speed of light. The event horizon is like a one-way boundary. Once you cross it, you cannot send signals back out. Holographic principle. Think of holography like a 3D movie stored on a 2D disc. The information about the 3D scene is encoded on a 2D surface. In physics, this suggests the information in a volume can be encoded on its boundary. Now, return to the cell idea. A cell is a bounded region where information and energy interact to maintain structure. If the universe has deep information boundary laws, so then it already has one of the key ingredients for a cell-like system. Now let us explore a set of possible parallels Raphael asked for, but with practical examples. Parallel: cell membrane and cosmic horizon. In a cell, the membrane controls what comes in and out. In cosmology, the horizon controls what can influence what. For example, there are regions of the universe so far away that their light will never reach us because expansion is accelerating. Those regions are effectively outside our causal reach. That is like being inside a cell where some outside region can never signal you. Parallel: nutrients and energy. In a cell, glucose is broken down to release energy. In the universe, hydrogen is fused into helium and heavier elements in stars, releasing energy. Stars are the engines. Without stars, the universe would be dark and cold quickly. So stars act like the metabolic core of many regions of the universe. Parallel: waste. In a cell, waste heat and byproducts must be removed. In the universe, waste heat is the infrared glow of galaxies, the cosmic background radiation, the entropy that spreads out. Over time, the universe moves toward a higher entropy state. Parallel: reproduction. In a cell, division creates two cells. In some cosmology models, black holes or inflation create new universes. These would be new compartments. If they inherit properties, that would be heredity. Parallel: signaling. Cells signal with molecules. Universes could signal through gravitational waves if there were connections. Gravitational waves pass through matter and carry information about violent events. If there were a higher dimensional medium, perhaps some signals could cross in ways we do not expect. Now, let us confront an obvious question. If we are inside a cell universe, why do we not see the organism? In biology, the inside of a cell is shielded. You cannot see the rest of the organism directly. You can only infer it. Similarly, if our universe is a compartment, we might not see beyond its boundary. This is consistent with our inability to see before the cosmic microwave background without indirect methods. The early universe was opaque to light, so our view is limited. Now, a deep question is whether the laws of physics could be different outside. In a cell, the environment outside can have different conditions, like different pH. In a universe, outside could have different constants. If so, then our universe could be a stable pocket with its own rule set. That is similar to how cells maintain a different internal chemistry from the outside environment. Now, consider the idea of the vacuum as a medium. In quantum field theory, the vacuum is not empty. It has fields and fluctuations. This vacuum could be like the cytoplasm of the larger organism. Our universe could be a localized excitation in that medium. Again, speculative. But there is a theme. The vacuum is active. Now, to make this episode docu-style, We should also include a reality check section. We should list the strongest reasons scientists do not treat the universe as a cell. Reason 1. Life is a biological category tied to chemistry and evolution. The universe does not show clear adaptation. Reason 2. The analogy does not produce unique predictions. Without predictions, it is not science. Reason 3. Many parallels are superficial. Networks look similar because math is universal. Reason 4. Reproduction is not established. Black hole, baby universes are unproven. Reason 5. There is no evidence of an outside energy flow. Reason 6. The universe does not show the kind of error correction and regulation living systems show. Now, to keep it balanced, we should also list reasons the analogy is still worth thinking about. Reason 1. It highlights the role of information and boundaries. Reason 2. It connects cosmology to thermodynamics, which is central to life. Reason 3. It encourages new ways to frame questions about the multiverse. Reason 4. It can inspire testable ideas, like looking for signatures of bubble collisions or studying whether constants optimize certain outputs. Reason 5. It helps people understand scale and emergence. Now let us go even deeper into the potential parallels by exploring a specific biological process and finding the best cosmic analog. Process: cell signaling. Cells receive signals on receptors. A receptor binds a molecule. That triggers a cascade. The cascade changes gene expression. This changes cell behavior. What is the cosmic analog? We could imagine external conditions affecting our universe's expansion rate or constants. That would change structure formation. That would change star formation. That would change the ability for life to form. So an external signal could alter the developmental path of the universe. If we observed unexpected shifts in fundamental physics over time, we could interpret them as signals, but we do not. Still, it is a possible mapping. Process: apoptosis, programmed cell death. In biology, apoptosis is triggered when a cell is damaged or when development requires it. It is a controlled process. In cosmology, what is controlled death? Perhaps vacuum decay. If the vacuum is metastable, then decay could be like apoptosis. A bubble forms, expands, and changes the physics. But is it controlled? We do not know. Process: differentiation. Cells become specialized based on signals and gene expression. In cosmology, differentiation could be the formation of different structures: stars, galaxies, clusters, voids. The initial fluctuations and physical laws determine what forms where. So the universe differentiates into regions with different roles. Again, a parallel. Now consider the idea of a cell being part of a brain. Neurons are cells. They communicate. They form networks. If universes were neurons, the larger organism could be a mind. How would universes communicate? Maybe through quantum entanglement at a higher level. Maybe through wormholes. There is a speculative idea linking entanglement and wormholes called ER equals EPR. It suggests that entangled particles might be connected by tiny wormholes. If something like that exists at large scales, then universes could be connected by entanglement. This is extremely speculative, but it shows that modern physics sometimes produces structures that look like connections. Now, another angle. Cells are made of smaller parts, and those parts have their own histories. Mitochondria were once independent bacteria. They became part of cells through endosymbiosis. So cells are not perfectly designed units. They are messy systems with layers of history. If universes are cells, maybe they also have history layers. maybe they contain remnants of earlier phases, like fossil records. In our universe, we do have fossils. The cosmic microwave background is a fossil of the early universe. The abundance of light elements is a fossil of nucleosynthesis. The distribution of galaxies is a fossil of early density fluctuations. So the universe has a record. That is very cell-like. Cells also have records in their DNA and in their chemical state. Now, a key part of docu-style is telling the story of how we got these ideas. So let us briefly trace the history. Humans once thought the sky was a dome. Then we learned Earth is a planet. Then we learned the sun is a star. Then we learned the Milky Way is one galaxy among many. Then we discovered the universe is expanding. Then we discovered the cosmic microwave background. Then we learned about dark matter and dark energy. At each step, the universe became larger and stranger. And each time, people asked, what are we inside of? So the cell idea is part of that ongoing story. Now let us explore a very specific parallel that is often overlooked: error correction. In biology, DNA replication has error correction. Cells have repair enzymes. They fix mistakes. Without that, genetic information would degrade. In physics, there is a concept of quantum error correction. In some holographic theories, space-time itself can be described using quantum error correcting codes. This is not just metaphor, it is a mathematical mapping. If space-time emerges from entanglement, then the stability of space-time might require error correction. That would be a very strong parallel to biology. It would suggest that the universe has built-in mechanisms to protect information. If so, then the universe is not just a passive stage. It is an actively stabilized structure. Again, this does not mean it is alive, but it means it has life like architecture. Now consider the idea of a cell having a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton gives the cell shape. It organizes movement. In the universe, what gives structure? Dark matter could be seen as a kind of scaffolding. We cannot see dark matter directly, but we infer it from gravity. It forms halos that galaxies form within. So dark matter is like the skeleton of the cosmic web. This analogy is popular and intuitive. Now, consider the immune system again, but with a different mapping. In organisms, immune systems detect patterns that are not self. In a universe, what is not self? Perhaps external physics. If our universe interacted with another, the collision could be detected as a pattern. That would be like an immune detection. But again, we do not see it. Now, we should also include a section about what would count as a breakthrough in this area. Breakthrough 1. Evidence of extra dimensions. If we found clear evidence that gravity leaks or that there are hidden dimensions, it would support the idea of our universe being a membrane in a larger space. Breakthrough 2. Evidence of bubble collisions. If we found an unmistakable pattern in the cosmic microwave background that matches a collision signature, it would support a multiverse environment. Breakthrough 3. Evidence that black holes produce new universes. This would require a quantum gravity theory with testable predictions. Breakthrough 4. Evidence that constants are optimized for a specific output. If constants appear tuned to maximize black holes or computation, that might suggest selection. Breakthrough 5. Evidence of information, boundary laws applying to our universe. If holography can be extended beyond special space-time cases to our universe, it would strengthen the boundary analogy. Now let us address one more strong objection. A cell is alive, because it has meaning in context. It has a purpose relative to the organism. Physics does not assign purpose. Purpose is a concept from minds. So to claim the universe is part of a living being, we must explain how purpose can exist at that level. There are a few ways. Option 1. The larger being is conscious. Then purpose exists as its goals. Option 2. The larger being is not conscious, but it still has function like a bacterium colony. Then purpose is just the result of selection. Option 3. There is no purpose, only structure, and calling it a living being is just a metaphor. In Dokyo style, we can present these options and make clear that we cannot pick one with current evidence. Now let us bring this to a close by returning to the everyday analogy. When you look at a cell under a microscope, you see a busy world. It has borders, it has engines, it has code, it has transport, it has repair, it has a past. From inside, it would feel like a universe. When you look at the night sky, you see a bigger world. It also has borders, at least in information. It has engines, stars. It has code, initial conditions, and laws. It has transport, the flow of matter along the cosmic web. It has a past, the cosmic background. So it is natural to wonder if we are inside something even bigger. The most responsible answer is that we do not know, but the question is not useless. It forces us to define what life is. It forces us to think about information and boundaries. It forces us to confront the limits of observation. And it reminds us that nature often builds the same kinds of patterns at very different scales. If the universe is a cell in a larger living being, then our physics might be the local chemistry of that cell. The larger being might be beyond direct detection, and we might be like molecular machines inside, carrying out processes that matter to something we cannot see. Or the idea might be nothing more than a powerful metaphor. Either way, it gives us a new lens. It makes the universe feel less like an empty stage and more like an active system. And it invites a final, grounded question. If we want to know whether we are inside something larger, what should we measure? We should measure boundaries. We should measure information limits. We should measure whether constants change. We should measure whether the early universe holds scars of interaction. We should measure whether black holes hide new physics. And we should keep the difference clear between what we can test and what we can only imagine. This was a quiet archive story where the story ends, sleep begins,